welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got the whole crew with us, Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with us on this Tuesday afternoon. A lot to get into around the Georgia Bulldogs. We wrapped up SEC Media Days last week. Plenty to tackle from the news from that. Some more recruiting developments, both good and bad for the Bulldogs, and a big weekend ahead. And then we'll talk a little Olympics and get ready for what's going to be a big Olympics season out in Paris and quite a few Bulldogs out there getting ready to compete. But Ben, I'm going to throw it to you to start things off. I think everybody's had a solid start to this week, but I don't think anybody quite like you. You want to share the news that you got earlier this week?
Wow, I didn't expect us to start the podcast off with my master's fortune, but yeah, I mean, for years, and I'll say this, I'll take it back even further. I mean, my parents moved to Atlanta in the 90s and have been submitting master's applications for probably 30 years now, even this year included. And when I called them, they let me know, hey, yeah, we didn't get accepted, but I did get my application accepted this year. I got 4 Monday tickets. And I have not decided how I'm going to use those other 3 tickets yet. So anybody listening to this, I'm easily bribed. I'm a good friend. So if you're trying to, get into the Masters on next Monday, it'll be early. From everybody that I've talked to about this opportunity, the pro shop will be stocked with gear on early Monday morning. You can get out there. You can kind of learn the course. It's not a tournament round. So I'm just getting my feet wet with a non-tournament round. But I figure, now that I've broken in, if I play my cards right, maybe they'll let me back after this year as well.
Ben, I did want to ask you too. Have you ever been this popular in your entire life? I feel like I was looking at Twitter and you were getting a lot of people very excited for you and being willing to tag along so you don't have to do this by yourself.
Now, don't get me wrong. I obviously, me, I'm a sucker for impressions on social media, likes and retweets. I appreciated the engagement with the news that I was getting to go to the Masters. I will say I was surprised how many replies and also just one-off text messages that I received letting me know that I've always been people's favorite friend or that I've always been a favorite coworker of theirs. I didn't know how much people appreciated me until yesterday. So it was nice to kind of figure out that, once I finally had one little piece of advantage over them, everybody wanted me on their side. So it was nice to hear the outpouring, and I'll read right through it. I can tell who the people are that are being genuine and who are being fake. So I'll factor that in next April.
Just so you know, Ben is now saved in my phone as Ben, and then in parentheses it says best friend. Kipp, you are rocking the Masters gear on this podcast. You've been before. What advice you got for Benny as he gets ready to go out there for the first time?
Get in line early if you want any merch. Take lots of notes, and just remember you will not have access to your phone that day. So, any recruits that you're tracking, just give them a heads up. Don't make any decisions that day. It's to hold off. That way that your coworkers at Dawgs 247 don't have too much on their hands while they're jealous of what you're doing in Augusta. But breathe it in, man. It's an incredible experience. Everything there is run insanely smooth, and enjoy those concession prices in the year 2025. Who knows what the future holds, but so far, it's the menu is just it's enjoyable. Just seeing those single digits. I know that a lot of people probably it brings up their childhood of a time far gone when you could get things for less than $10, but it's the overall experience is world class. So take it all in. You've worked hard for this, and congratulations, man.
You're right. I have, Kipp. I have worked very hard for this. I have.
Well, guys, let's talk about another sporting event that be very popular in Georgia. Getting ready for the college football season with the Bulldogs. We wrapped up SEC Media Days down in Dallas last week, and a lot of news coming out of Friday as the event was done. Getting the predicted order of finish, getting the All-SEC teams as voted on by those in attendance in Dallas. And let's start with the All-SEC teams. Georgia had 15 players selected over the three teams getting ready for this season. And you look at Georgia had 6 first-team players. That was the most among any team in the SEC. And I'll run through those first-teamers for those who hadn't seen this. Carson Beck, Trevor Etienne, Tate Ratledge, Michael Williams, Nazir Stackhouse, Malachi Starks. I'm going to start with you, Kipp. Did you have any big takeaways as far as Georgia when it comes to how this all-SEC team turned out, having 6 guys on there and wind up putting 15 overall on the preseason all-SEC teams?
Yeah, I think no real surprises. It's actually impressive how well respected some of the guys are. For Georgia, Trevor Etienne coming in as a transfer, obviously very highly regarded. And I think at the same time, they're kind of projecting a little bit on what he's going to do with the Georgia offensive line and overall in that offense. And at the same time, I think Nazir Stackhouse, it's often you see these all SEC teams and it's straight stat based. They just go and look and see who led the league in sacks, who had the most tackles for loss. And Nazir, he's been productive, but again, he's asked to play a position in Georgia's defense that you're not going to stat pad, and you have to buy into your role. And I think it just kind of shows the respect he has from the writers to acknowledge that he's really, really good at his job. And I think overall, no real surprises with that first team. It was a little more interesting when you get to the second and third team, the order of guys. But I think that first team was pretty much chalk.
Ben, what about you? Anything stand out to you as far as Georgia's concerned with how the all-SEC teams panned out?
No real surprises. I think that the right guys were probably first teamers, I guess, in some respects, just because he's never played for Georgia. Etienne being a first teamer when there are a lot of running back options in the league. Surprised isn't how I would describe it, but it was one that I saw it and I was like, oh, okay, the writers did think that he was warranting of the first team spot. To Kipp's point, I think as you get into second and the third team, especially along the offensive line, I think it's interesting to see how Georgia offensive linemen are viewed nationally, maybe compared to how they're viewed within, our little bubble as well. But I also, just find it interesting that a guy like Dylan Fairchild that hasn't played, as much football as some other guys was on the second team. Very warranted. That one is not one that I have any issues with whatsoever, but I think that's one people had to be really in the weeds, I think, to recognize that one as a second team all SEC preseason selection. So I actually kudos to people for, I think, recognizing that one. But I just, find it interesting which offensive linemen people think are better than others nationally.
I'll say this, I haven't voted on this. It's always very complicated when it comes to offensive line because they give you offensive guard and tackle together. So you have to decide, how are you going to value? I believe you have to pick 8 offensive linemen and trying to go through and figure out, how much do you want to put on like Pro Football Focus grades? How much do you want to put on previous all SEC teams? It is pretty complicated. I will say this, offensive line, still a lot easier than long snapper. I think that might be my next doing something. If I do something different in college football, it's creating stats for long snapper because we were really lucky that the all SEC team selections from last year, both of them are back for another year because there was not a lot of reading material, if you guys can believe it, when it comes to long snapper. But Ben, you hit on one of the bigger things for me. I was a little surprised to see Trevor Etienne, although I think it makes a lot of sense. I think as a voter and as you go through this, you do try to kind of balance production from the year before and what they're capable of doing in the year to come. And I think a great example of that also is Oscar Delp coming in there, that to see him included, I believe he was he on the second team or third team? Looks like he was on the third team. I wondered where Oscar would fall and if people would say, okay, we're going to include him because he's kind of picking up where Brock Bowers left off. I think it's warranted, but again, as a voter, you kind of have to balance. All right, am I looking ahead and not really putting a ton of weight into what they did in 2023, which is, again, a little bit more complicated when you look at a guy like Trevor Etienne. But I think he's a guy that makes a lot of sense because you look at what he was doing and what he was working with in Florida. I think his situation is much improved at Georgia. I think I had him a little lower. I think I might have had him as my third or fourth running back. I did a story on Dawgs 24/7 with my ballot. But I can see why people projected a big year for him. He's got improved pieces around him, again, an improved offensive line. I do think that bodes well for his first season at Georgia. Well, let's talk out of the all SEC voting and the SEC Media Days predicted order of finish. I don't think this was necessarily surprising. Georgia is the favorite and pretty overwhelmingly to win the SEC. Texas came in second, kind of matched what was predicted earlier in the week by Nick Saban. I know that raised some eyebrows with him picking Georgia and Texas playing the SEC title game and not including Alabama. But, I'll be honest, I thought maybe, it would be a little bit closer in the points as far as Georgia and Texas, especially it being out in Dallas. But I don't think it caught any of us off guard as far as Georgia being the presumed favorite to win the conference. Ben, did you have any thoughts about that as far as Georgia getting that pick and everybody looking at the Dogs as the top team in the conference?
The disparity probably surprised me a little bit just because, again, I realized that everybody, I think has accepted that Georgia is the class of the sport right now. With that said, I mean, Alabama and Texas were both in the college football playoff last season. And I realized circumstances have changed in some respects, especially for Alabama, that would maybe decrease the likelihood that they would get those champion votes. But still, I mean, for Georgia to get, I think it was 165 points, and then Texas was second with 27 points. That's such a significant gap. I mean, almost everybody at SEC Media Days thought that Georgia was going to win the SEC championship. And I guess that part of it surprises me a little bit. I also almost wonder the way that Kirby Smart handled it 2 years ago after they won the national championship and then weren't selected to be the SEC champion, and Georgia just, ran the table, and the SEC went 15-0 and had arguably a better season in 2022. And he almost had everybody doubted us approach to it all. I think that everybody has probably reached the point. I'm not going to be the person that doubts Georgia football and allows that to be something that they utilize, to their advantage. And so I think that probably plays part of it, but I would have expected Alabama to get a few more votes. I would have expected Texas to get a few more votes, but aside from the 2 Vanderbilt votes and the South Carolina vote, I think everybody else probably warranted a sprinkle of votes here or there as well. Maybe Missouri should have gotten a couple, or I would have expected them to get a couple.
Yeah, running through those: Georgia 165 first place votes, Texas 27, Alabama 12, Ole Miss 4, Vanderbilt 2, LSU 2, and South Carolina 1. We continue to see Vandy get votes every year. And I started to tweet on Friday, friends don't let friends get upset about the Vanderbilt votes because it happens every single year. And you're just not going to stop it. Kipp, did you have any thoughts on how this played out, having Georgia not only be the favorite, but, as we just kind of went through, pretty overwhelming favorite when it comes to winning the SEC this year?
Well, I don't want to throw cold water on that prediction for Georgia fans, but if I went back and kind of looked and wanted to see how often the media got it right, and got it right 9 times, but it was out of 32. So, I mean, that's, if we're playing baseball, I think that's what a 282, 281 batting average, which right now would be outstanding. You'd be batting cleanup for the Braves, no doubt. But at this time, I think that's just kind of showing that it's really tough to predict who's going to win the SEC championship. And now, there's no division. So, maybe that, the predictions are a little bit stronger this year because you don't have that curveball to kind of pigeonhole the 2 best teams in the conference. But I think, I think overall it kind of not really a lot of surprises. It definitely makes the Texas-Georgia game, really intriguing. But I think Oklahoma just kind of stands out because, I mean, there was a time when, that program was the one everyone was talking about, not Texas. And now you kind of look 8th in the SEC, I believe is where they're projected. That's, if you're thinking about the season, what is that, like 8-4, going maybe 4-4 in the conference? It's not disrespectful, I guess. That's where they are as a program, but I guess it just kind of surprises me to think about because I mean that's early on in Kirby Smart's tenure. I mean that Oklahoma game was one of and still is one of the most memorable Georgia games, in the last 10, 15 years, probably ever for a lot of fans. So now they're in a prove it season coming into the SEC. I just think that's really interesting. And then I guess the other one would probably be Missouri. I think if we're trying to pick a team that maybe got a little bit too much respect, I think Missouri at 6. I just don't think that defense is going to be able to stop anyone. And they sent a lot of players to the draft. They had more guys drafted on defense than Georgia did, actually. And they lost their defensive coordinator. So I just think that they're a team that probably underachieves this year based on that the preseason prediction right there. And just looking at the bottom of it as well. I mean, you got Florida 12th. Yeah, that's brutal. I mean, that's another program that just is not where it is historically. And so I just think that the teams towards the bottom, it's I mean, sure, it's great bulletin board material, but it might end up holding true. And for those fan bases, it's just that's not what they're putting. That shouldn't be part of their fandom. They should, they think they deserve better. And I think that the people in charge of those programs will probably be asked to change course following this season.
A lot of people that are listening to this will probably be mad at me for saying this, but if I had been out at media days, I probably would have picked Texas to win the league. And I don't think that that's a knock on Georgia necessarily. I just think that those two teams are pretty similar. And I think I like the fact that Texas has that as the home game. So if I'm just like projecting out an entire season, I probably would favor Texas a little bit, especially given the rest of the schedule Georgia has too.
You got to remember the rematch, though, would be in Atlanta, which would definitely give Georgia an opportunity. And Kipp hit on something I wanted to pose to both of you guys. I wanted to run down the predicted order of finish from all the voters. It starts with Georgia, goes to Texas, number 3, Alabama, number 4, Ole Miss, number 5, LSU, number 6, Missouri, number 7, Tennessee, number 8, Oklahoma, number 9, Texas A&M, number 10, Auburn, number 11, Kentucky, number 12, Florida, number 13, South Carolina, number 14, Arkansas, number 15, Mississippi State, and number 16, Vanderbilt. Is there a team, when you hear those rankings, that you think can overachieve based on that? And I'll start just because I've been staring at this for the last week and went through and looked at all these games. My team is Texas A&M. I think I have them like 5th in the SEC. I really like Mike Elko. I thought it was very smart what was brought up early in SEC media days that A&M's been awfully quiet this offseason. It's a very different tenure than what we saw with Jimbo. Really like Mike Elko. I think he did an outstanding job at Duke. I think people kind of lose sight of the very end of the David Cutcliffe era there was not very good, and he stepped in, did a great job. I think he's a great fit there. So I have A&M being one of the teams that winds up surprising, and I don't think they're quite a playoff team, but I think they're around a 9-win team, and I think that they're going to really make progress a lot quicker in College Station than folks figured. I'll start with you, Kipp. Is there a team, when you hear how this bore out, this predicted order of finish, that you think could wind up surprising people this year?
Can you say that a team ranked or predicted the finish number 3 can overachieve? I know that, again, we spent the whole week just everyone's staring at Nick Saban just being in the media chair and just sitting there talking about other teams all week. But you have to think about the last 4 times that Alabama wasn't picked to win the SEC. They won the SEC all 4 times. And so I know that, different head coach, but Kalen DeBoer is, so far has been an elite head football coach. And I think that they're not being talked about enough. I mean, right now we have the predictions of Texas versus Ole Miss in the SEC championship. Obviously Georgia and Texas get mentioned a lot, but I just think Alabama winning the SEC is very much still in line with being possible. And I would count that as a team that is being, maybe not counted on as much as probably the coaches and staff in Tuscaloosa thinks. So I think Alabama's definitely a team that's not being talked about enough. And I think if you're looking towards the bottom, I would go with Kentucky just because they return more production than any other program in the SEC. So if you have them finishing, they have them finishing 11th. I think that again, it's not a team that is ever really strongly in contention to win the conference. But again, we could be talking about another contract extension in Lexington because all they have to do to beat the expectations is finish inside the top 10 of the conference, and I just can't see them not doing that.
Ben, what about you? Is there a team, when you look at how the predicted order of finish turned out, that just kind of screams to you that they have a real chance to overachieve?
I like the Alabama pick just because it's a little, they're still a highly favored team. They're just not as high as they could have been or should have or have been in previous years. Also, I don't know what to do with Vanderbilt. I mean, they're last in the league, but they have 2 first-place votes. So I don't know whether they're overrated, underrated. It's hard to say. I would probably say for me, 4 through 7, Ole Miss, LSU, Missouri, and Tennessee, there's a pretty fine line between the 4 of them. And so for that, I'm actually going to go with Tennessee. I like what they have done offensively the last 2 seasons. I really like the quarterback that they have coming in this season. I think that, they haven't had success against Georgia. So I know that a lot of people in the Georgia world sometimes diminish some of the accomplishments that they've had over the last 2 years. But the strides that they've made as a football program the last 2 seasons, I think have been undersold because of how good 2 years ago was and the small step back that they took last year. But their small step back that they took last year would have been a huge step forward for Tennessee and just about any other season over the past decade. And so I think that they've got a lot of things moving in the right direction for them, even on the recruiting trail this cycle. They've certainly given Georgia a few headaches here and there in the 2025 class. So I just think they're showing signs of a program that is doing things right as of right now. And I know that won't be a popular opinion for a lot of people listening to this, but there's someone that if we're looking up and they're 4th or 3rd in the conference by the end of the season, that really wouldn't surprise me at all for a team that was projected 7th.
Yeah, I mean, they've got James Pierce, who many consider one of the top pass rushers in the country. And to me, with Tennessee, it all depends on Nico. Is he ready? And, he may not play like a 5-star from the jump, but if he plays well, I do think they have a chance to really surprise some folks. We're going to take a quick break, come back, talk about some recruiting news for the Bulldogs, preview a big weekend, and then talk a little Olympics. Yep, before we jump into some of the recruiting news, you had a question for me and Ben. What you got? What you want to ask us?
I want to rewind it a little bit, and we talked about the all SEC picks preseason. Who's a guy that did not make that team that you think could make the postseason all SEC team?
Great question. I think we might all have the same answer.
Off the top of my head, Dylan Bell is the name that immediately comes to mind for me. I think he's a guy that at one point I said he would be Georgia's leading receiver this year. I think I'm kind of moving back to Dominic Lovett, but having said that, I think really highly of Dylan Bell. I know Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl was really hyping him up on Sunday. So I'd say him, and just to throw another one, since it sounds like Ben is also going to say Dylan Bell, Ben Urasek. I think that, him coming in late, I think, also people need to know when you fill out this all SEC ballot, there's only a certain number of names included. I can't go in there and write in somebody's name. So Ben Urasek wasn't on there, and I probably wouldn't have voted him preseason just with him coming in and some of the talented guys. But those would be my 2, Dylan Bell and Ben Urasek. Ben, which ones would you go with?
Those would have been my 2 as well. I had a feeling all of us might say Dylan Bell, but since I wanted it just for the sake of creativity, I and I have a question. I might have missed this when you were running through it. Did either of the rising sophomore linebackers, were they all SEC, Raylan Wilson or CJ Allen?
I don't believe so. Were they, Kipp?
No, that's why I was trying to sneak in last and get one through. I came close, but go ahead.
Well, it's a cop-out answer because I was just going to say I think whichever one of them has the better season is the one that, or maybe the one that, sort of takes the reins with, early in the season as well. Like I think that they have a really good opportunity to look at the end of the season like one of the best linebackers in the country because they're going to be a star linebacker for a Georgia defense that is going to be one of the best defenses in the country. And so that I think those are two guys that will in some way, shape, or form, probably both of them crack the all SEC team, maybe not first team, but I think that postseason they'll at least get some love.
And Kipp, what were your answers?
Yeah, I mean, I think knowing that Jamon Dumas-Johnson was a third team preseason pick and knowing that he basically, left because he saw the writing on the wall with CJ Allen, I think that tells me where the people in Athens see CJ Allen going. I mean, even with the return of Small Munden, he's missed time with injuries. I think, CJ has a strong chance of leading this team in snaps by the end of the season. And I mean, we saw him as a freshman just get better and better as the year went on. And his games against Ole Miss and Tennessee last November, I know, again, he wants to flush that game film against Alabama out, but so do a lot of players on this team, including the first team All-SEC pick at quarterback. So I just think CJ Allen obviously is a guy that I think second team All-SEC would be a good projection for him. And then I think other than the fact that Georgia could have multiple tight ends on this All-SEC team, I think I would go with Jared Wilson at center. I just think it's a guy that looked really athletic at the spring game. No snapping issues. And I just think with this offensive line, they're going to go as far as he takes them. And I think, if this team ends up having finally a Joe Moore Award winning offensive line when they should have won it at least once, if not twice in the past, you're going to be looking at Jared Wilson as a huge reason for that. So I just think he's a guy that at the end of the season, they're going to be talking a lot about him. And for all we know, he could be a guy that just plays 1 year at Georgia.
Yeah, Jared's a good pick, and I saw Craig Loss in the comments said that he may be the most athletic center in the country, and I think I included this on my ballot story. I was going to make him my second team selection, but again, there's only a small pool that they allow you to vote on, so Jared Wilson wasn't on there. And CJ Allen was a guy that I kind of went back and forth on with Smile Munden. Should I put him in over Smile? I went with Smile just because he's just so athletic, and I know he's been beat up, but I could see him piling up tackles again like he's done the last few seasons. So I think all of those are really good picks, really good projections. They're going to have strong arguments to make this team by the time the season's in the books. Let's talk about some recruiting news for Georgia, and it starts with Saturday. A big commitment for the Bulldogs. 4-star interior offensive lineman Cortez Smith committed to Georgia. He chose the Bulldogs over Georgia Tech, Miami, and South Carolina. 4-star interior offensive lineman, the 10th overall interior offensive lineman, according to 24/7 Sports, 6'3", 310. Ben, you were in the house. You got to be there for the commitment, and you followed Cortez for a while. How did Georgia land this Parkview stand out, and what do you feel like Georgia's getting in him?
Well, this is one of those that when I started back with Dawgs 24/7 last June, I was talking to folks about like, all right, we're trying to piece together the 2024 class at the time, but let's try and get a head start on the 2025 class to have an idea of who Georgia's already trending for early. Cortez Smith was going to be one of the first names that came up because he's somebody that's really been tied to Georgia since when he was in middle school. I mean, he was coming to Georgia Kirby Smart camps when he was in 7th grade, when he was in 8th grade. He started camping in the major camps when he was at got into the high school level in 9th grade. And he was a very known prospect for Georgia, really from the moment that he got to high school at Parkview. He told me this past week that he didn't actually have a committable offer from Georgia that he felt like, all right, I'm truly wanted and I am now going to be a top target for them, until the Tennessee game at home, that 1-3 game in the rain. He was out there. He got that offer while he was standing on the field in Sanford Stadium prior to that game. So you can only imagine the type of environment that he felt like he was standing in when he got the news that like he could end up at Georgia any moment that he wanted to from then on. As a prospect, 6'3", 6'4", 285, 290 pounds. He actually probably is up more closer to about 300, 310 now. I think we have him listed at 310. He's probably been a little bit under that for most of the process, but I think that that's probably closer to accurate at this point. I mean, just when you think of people that you would want to build an offensive line around, and I know that at Georgia right now, Cedric Van Pran is going to be the person that everybody points to and says, how should you be as a center at the University of Georgia? How should you carry yourself? How should you treat your teammates? What should you be from a talent standpoint? That's going to be what everybody looks toward. And I think that as of all these guys that Georgia has recruited over the last several years, Cortez Smith probably fits that about as well as anybody could. I mean, he is going to work his tail off. I found it really funny when, he was having his commitment ceremony on Saturday. They had a bunch of coaches coming up and talking about, his upbringing, things that make him great, advice that he should have for the future. But he had a coach that came up, and the first thing he said was, Cortez Smith's worst high school football game was his first high school varsity football game. He had a bunch of terrible snaps. It was an awful week. He left it, and I was sitting next to Cortez during this. So this was a very interesting ceremony because normally you've got, they bring him in, whatever. Cortez wanted to be part of the group as they all did it. So I was sitting in the front row and he was just sitting in the front row right next to me. And when his coach said your worst high school football game was your first high school football game, Cortez made a sound effect. He said, "Yep, sure was." Like he was acknowledging like, yeah, it was terrible. And his coach went on to tell the story that the reason why he was saying that is because he was a little bit worried about it. Like you saw this guy that struggled so bad. Sometimes some guys just aren't wired. They say, all right, I'm not cut out for this. Cortez was the exact opposite, and that he could tell within a week that Cortez Smith was going to be a great football player because of how he responded to that, tough game as a freshman. And so I think that that's just who Cortez Smith is. He knows that he was undersized at times. He knows that, when he was coming in as a freshman, people might have seen him as a possible guy that would grow into be an offensive tackle. That didn't happen. And he realized that early on and recognized, okay, if I'm going to make it in this, as a big time offensive line prospect, I'm going to have to play center. I'm going to have to play offensive guard, things that I maybe am not as comfortable doing or haven't done as much at the high school level. He dove right into that and said, yeah, I embrace that. If Stacey Searles and Kirby Smart say they want me as their center of this class, that's what I want to be. If they say that they want me to be the center, but they want me to take a shot at guard, that's what I'm going to be. And so I think that that's what you're getting in Cortez Smith. And then also you're just getting raw strength. I mean, this is a guy that finished first and second in the shot put and the discus at the state championships this past year. And I was actually out with him the day before he went down to Valdosta for his sectionals. And he had not qualified for state yet. And I was asking him, all right, what throws do you think you're going to have in the discus and the shot put? This guy is so humble. He undersold himself by about 20 feet in the discus. And I go and look, he said to me this past weekend, he barely got through in the regionals, but he had a feeling that he just had a bad showing in the regionals, but he barely squeaked through the bottom half of the table, ended up getting to the state championship. And he just had a feeling that he was going to have a good week. And he ended up putting up a PR in the shot put in the state championship game. So you're getting raw strength, but you're also getting someone that obviously clutches up in big time moments as well.
Georgia up to 21 commits in the 2025 class. He is the third interior offensive lineman Georgia's picked up with Mason Short and Dontrell Glover. Kipp, what do you think about what Georgia has done as far as offensive linemen in the 2025 cycle, especially being able to add Cortez Smith?
I mean, Stacey Searles has a type. And you look at Cortez Smith, the one thing that stood out to me initially was that shot put over 56 feet. That along with his film says that he's going to come in ready to contribute in the run game. That's where his strength, point of attack, getting that push in the run game. And that's been, Georgia's identity along the offensive line under Kirby Smart is they put a premium on size and they want to mash you, at the point of attack. And one of the things that kind of really stuck out to me is just looking at Cortez's profile on social media. He turned 17 in October. So he's going to be, he's not going to turn 18 till midway through his freshman season. So this is a guy that's still physically maturing. And, that kind of made me go, oh, that makes sense. Because I had seen, the size that he had, the verified size before. And I thought he was a little undersized. I was like, oh, okay, well, 6'1.5", 270, maybe he can play center for Georgia. Definitely that would be the position I would project him at. And, now 6'3", 315 pounds. And, again, not 17 years old yet. So you kind of go, oh, okay, this makes sense. This guy's still growing. He's still physically maturing. And obviously that's where he kind of just moved up the board and became a major center target for Georgia in this class. And yeah, just overall looking at this group and knowing that, Georgia has a very strong group of interior offensive line. Mason Short, a guy that, again, 6'5", 305 pounds, kind of reminds me of Dylan Fairchild. And then the guys that they're still in the mix for. You look at Juan Gaston and Nick Brooks. They're battling Texas for Nick Brooks, but those are both 6'7", 345-pound guys. And so you just kind of look at Georgia's class last cycle. It was massive, probably never going to be matched in terms of size. But at the same time, Stacey Searles just goes the next cycle and says, I'm going to bring in another 5-6 offensive linemen in this class because my room is never going to, have depth issues while I'm working for Kirby Smart. And Kirby Smart would say, if you're working here, that room's never going to get thin again, or you won't be here. And I just think that's basically what Stacey Searles is doing and what it looks like he's set to do this cycle again.
Well, Ben, that was some good news for Georgia on Saturday, but there were a few recruits that the Bulldogs were fighting for hard that they wound up missing out on. 5-star wide receiver Derek Meadows committed to LSU. 4-star edge Bryce Davis picks Clemson, and 3-star linebacker Christian Gass went with Tennessee. What can you tell us about any of those recruitments? If anything in particular stood out for you, were you surprised by any of these decisions? Any thoughts on how some of these recruitments played out?
I wasn't surprised by any of the decisions. I mean, I think Derek Meadows in particular probably could have gone a variety of different directions. I don't think Georgia ever felt like they were all the way in on that one, but they were, giving it a shot, and they at least got a hat on the table. But I don't think Georgia was expecting that one at any point in that recruitment, really. Bryce Davis, we've talked a bunch about that one as someone that by the time he was making his decision, it sounds actually like, and I was not totally tapped in on this because Georgia was kind of on the outside at this point. But in the last 24 hours or so of that recruitment, it sounds like Duke and Clemson were in a legitimate recruiting battle that was going on. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes there exactly, but ultimately Clemson won out. That seemed like the logical choice once it became clear that Georgia wasn't going to be the choice. I wrote about that in my notebook earlier this week at Dawgs 24/7. So if you want to go check that out, it might have been on my Q&A. I apologize, in the Q&A that I did on the board yesterday. So definitely go subscribe and check that out. But I, sort of talked about how the nuance that happened in some of these recruiting situations. A lot of people were asking me, was this Georgia's decision or Bryce Davis's decision? And sometimes it's just more complicated than that. And I think that both sides have to make very important decisions for them based on rosters, and players have to make decisions based on depth chart and things like that. And so I think that it was a mutual decision, for lack of a better term, on that one. The one that stung the most, I would say, it's funny because he's the one that's the lowest rated on the 24/7 Sports rankings for right now, is Christian Gass, the linebacker from Eastside, went to the same high school that Eric Stokes went to, someone that I've gotten to know pretty well since January when he came on that first junior day to Georgia. And Georgia did a really good job in this recruitment, getting into it. I think that Glenn Schumann, Chidera Uzodiribe both played a key role in this recruitment. I think this is a credit. This is one you just got to tip your cap. I know it's not easy as a Georgia person sometimes to tip your cap to Tennessee, but this is one where I think they did a really good evaluation. I think that Christian Gass is somebody that is going to have a lot of success at the next level. I think that there will be a lot of debates going on in terms of what makes the most sense for him when it comes to that development. But I think that he's going to find success at the next level, regardless of where he goes to school. I think that Josh Heupel personally invested himself into this recruitment in a way that gave Tennessee a pretty good advantage in this one as well. It stings, but it's not one that I think when Georgia looks at the end of the cycle, they're going to be totally sweating out having missed this on an in-state linebacker. But he is someone that I would expect Georgia to continue to recruit all the way until signing day. I don't think that they're going to, push the envelope for him, but I do think that they're going to see what they can do to try and get him back in the class. And I think that the most interesting part with Christian Gass committing to Tennessee is now, all right, you've got Zayden Walker in the class. That one feels, you're confident in that one. You've got Jaden Perlotti committed, but there's a lot of buzz about him potentially ending up elsewhere. He might take some visits, way out of state this upcoming week. He's been, been getting some crystal balls to Tennessee as well. I still think that recruitment has some twists and turns to play out before signing day, before we know what's actually going to play out before it's all said and done with that one. But, what does Georgia do? I mean, Christian Gass is, as of right now, not seen as an option, but I think that the three committed guys Georgia will continue to recruit at linebacker are Christian Gass, Alabama linebacker Luke Metz, who has said that he is, 1,000% committed to Alabama. And I do think that it'll take a lot to get him off of that Alabama pledge, but Alabama's got a lot of linebackers committed, and he does come from a Georgia family. So I just don't think you can totally rule that one out. And then Anthony Crua, who's committed to UNC right now. I think that unless Georgia has some crazy eval out there or they're able to win out in the Ty Jackson recruitment, I think that one of those three committed linebackers will end up in Georgia's class. And I can't say on July 23rd which one of them I think that it would be. I just think Georgia's going to have at least two linebackers in this class. So if Jaden Perlotti doesn't end up in the class and they're not able to go get Ty Jackson, or, I think that they will try and flip one of these guys that they've been in it in June, because that's just how Georgia typically operates.
A lot of good intel there from Ben. And, I always like reminding people, Georgia's not going to land everybody. Although, the Bulldogs do such a good job in recruiting, you're not going to land everybody, but still got a very strong 2025 class coming together. Ben, this is going to be a big weekend coming up with a lot of folks in town, with fall camp right around the corner and Georgia starting to focus on the upcoming season. What can you tell us about the people that you expect to be in town for Georgia this weekend? Names to know, and just the general feeling around what's coming up this weekend?
This is going to be the big end of July summer cookout. I think everyone across the country is going to have people in town. I do have a tentative list on Dawgs 24/7 right now. They are going to host a bunch of 2026 targets that are top targets. I think that the 2025 class, the prospect that intrigues me the most right now is Alabama running back commit Anthony Rogers. He's someone that has said that he's going to continue to be recruited by Georgia and Ohio State while being committed to Alabama. I think that, Georgia is trying to figure out the second running back situation, so we'll see there.
Well, guys, we're getting ready for a big weekend with the start of the Olympics, and the Georgia Bulldogs will be well represented. I believe, Kipp, you said 33 Bulldogs will be in Paris, although I do think that includes some of the behind-the-scenes people like Maria Taylor and some of the other folks who have been at UGA. And I kind of have a broad question for you guys. It's not really Georgia related, and I'll start with you, Kipp. Is there a event in this year's Olympics that you're really looking forward to, or just in any Olympics that you're like, all right, I can't miss this. I really want to watch this event?
Well, I'm gonna take the easy way out there, and I'll just go with the basketball, because one, obviously, Anthony Edwards being over there, anytime he's on the court, it's much watch for me. And then off the court, he's much watch in interviews as well. I mean, you got a team that includes LeBron James, Steph Curry, Joel Embiid, possibly Kevin Durant if he's healthy, and they're interviewing Anthony Edwards, and he just says, "I'm still the number one option." And it's just kind of a reminder that he is that next wave of NBA talent. And this is kind of that moment where they're going to be handing the baton to him to take, the next wave of NBA stars and take over. And so I think while they're trying to put that stamp to the end of their Olympic careers, most likely for all those guys I listed, he's going to want to become, the face of the league, at least in international play, and one of the main stars of the league. And just as a Hawks fan, I want to see what this Australia team's got, because Dyson Daniels is out there getting 5 steals, picking, Team USA apart as well, looking outstanding in games against Germany and France. And they're asking a lot of him. So as someone looking at the main piece of a DeJounte Murray trade, I want to see what Dyson Daniels looks like, because I just think a 6'8", 190-pound off guard who can be an all-NBA defender and actually show up to work and back up his stance as being an elite defender is something that, I'm really excited about. So there's, for me personally, I think this year's international play is really intriguing, and there's a lot of really, really good international teams as well.
Yeah, it looked like the U.S. Had their hands full with South Sudan the other day in the pre-Olympic exhibition, but it's going to be fun. And like you said, Anthony Edwards, definitely going to be somebody to watch. Ben, is there any particular event you're really looking forward to when it comes to the Olympics?
I'm definitely looking forward to watching Anthony Edwards kind of come into his own on that team. And then, Sepp Struck, I'm a golf guy. I think Sepp Struck already medaled. I think watching him compete again is something I'm excited for.
Going to be fun, no doubt about that. Well, I can't get out of here without bringing up College Football 25 again. We talked briefly about it last week. I'd only played it a little bit. Pretty much spent the entire weekend playing it and feeling good about it. Still learning a lot. Still trying to figure out defense. I'll start with you, Kipp. Have you had much time on the sticks? Any thoughts on what this new game looks like?
Yeah, it's a game that every week I'm trying to learn more and more about, like, everyone's just trying to see which plays are overpowered, and I think still defensively, I guess I could say at best it's a work in progress. The tackling is still something that leaves a lot to be desired. Trying to get the right angle, using that switch stick to go from, safety to linebacker. Every team basically just rolling their quarterbacks out on every single play. There's a lot of offensive plays that are getting spammed. And that reverse flea flicker was like the first week everyone was running that out like every game. But now that we're kind of getting into it and learning the playbooks more, I think at this point it's just about waiting on them to kind of patch a couple things up and see if you can balance the gameplay out a little bit, and maybe we can go a game or two without throwing 3 picks in a row.
Yeah, good luck with that. And also the jet sweep we figured out works very, very well in this game. Ben, have you had a chance to play the new College Football 25 very much? Any thoughts so far?
I'm bad at video games. That's really all it comes down to. But it's a great game. I strongly endorse the game for everybody. I really do.
Yeah, we're going to get a league going here before too long. And hey, I'll preview a story I've got coming on Wednesday. Gone through and simulated Georgia's entire 2024 season. So got all the content, all the stats. Just to kind of preview it, I don't think Georgia fans would be thrilled with how it's gone, but I think it could wind up having a happy ending by the time it's all said and done. We're going to wrap up the episode right there. I appreciate Kipp and Ben for popping on. Thanks to everyone who watched this live, everyone who is listening to this after the fact. Be sure and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and go to Dawgs 24/7 on YouTube as well. Want to make sure and tell everybody this is our last only one episode a week with fall camp getting started next week. I do believe that on Tuesday we're going to have our fall camp breakouts draft, so we'll have a chance to draft some dogs and talk about who we've got big expectations for. Be sure to subscribe to Dawgs 24/7 at Dawgs247.com. Also go to Dawgs 24/7 on YouTube and TikTok as well, because, fellas, the season's almost here. We're a little bit over a month away, and I have a feeling we're going to turn around and be getting ready for that Clemson game before you know it. We'll wrap it up right there. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.